So, okay, good morning, everybody. So this is our first official class of the Tulsa 2019 Backend module. Uh, Here's kind of what we're going to go over. Hopefully today, I'm not sure if we'll make all this today. Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a lot of material in here, but I just want to start off kind of with the basics of what is NodeJS to make sure that everybody's on the same page so we kind of know what we're getting into, right? So you guys, in the previous modules with Preston, you guys learned JavaScript, correct?
Yes.
And you guys learned client-side JavaScript, meaning that it ran all in the browser. So with Node.js, it's the fundamental difference that it's server-side JavaScript. It runs on the server, and don't let those terms scary. Client server may sound a little bit intimidating, but it's just essentially where the web page is being consumed and where it's being served from. That's kind of the difference. So yeah, the server can be your laptop, it can be your cell phone, it can be a server in the cloud, it can be something in your closet, and the client can be any one of those things as well, right? So those things can be completely interchangeable. And before we go on, could you remind me, Cheryl and Danny, kind of what your experience level is, so I kind of know the general audience?
My experience level is?
Yeah, with all this.
I'm a former programmer. I've programmed in RPG in the past. Graduated from OSU IT in software development. So I've taken C#, PHP, Python classes, and now I'm taking JavaScript.
Okay, awesome. And is that Linda that joined us?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Linda.
Hello.
Okay, and Danny, remind me your experience level.
My experience is just playing with it at home and then y'all's playing in class. That's really all I've had experience-wise. I've done a lot of stuff on my own, with what you got, with you guys, like, the others in the class there. I know everything that we've gone over, I still think that I struggle with understanding, like I know what a function is, I know how to write one, but like I don't understand, I still have a fundamentally disconnect, like I don't know how the word to say it, but your front-end class is all my experience, and I think I've done pretty well with front-end class. I've learned a ton from you guys, and yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at,
Okay.
That makes sense.
Awesome. And Linda?
Yeah, so experience level, so in all my jobs, I've kind of been pulled to the tech side of things. I've worked on databases, but this is my first real experience in the coding side of things. I've worked and tried to go through a whole bunch of online classes on my own, probably for the past maybe 2 years. But this class is really the first class that I've tried to actually code on my own.
Okay, awesome. Well, it sounds like everybody's more or less kind of on the same level, and it's going to be your guys' responsibility to stop or slow me down whenever we get to somewhere that you feel like you're going to get lost. Please do not be shy. This is, I'm not teaching for myself, I'm teaching for you guys, right? So I want to make sure you guys learn. So if you start losing kind of where we are, just be like, hey, wait a minute, could you go over that again? Because that's going to be critical. Ask Seth, because if I think everybody's on the same page, I would just keep going, and I've already lost everybody 50 miles back, and that's definitely not what we want for anybody, right?
For sure.
Okay, so let's dive into this then. And some of these terms, so here we're just talking about what is Node.js. So it's essentially JavaScript that runs on the server. Whenever it runs on the server, that means you don't have a DOM. And who remembers what a DOM is?
Document Object Model.
Yes. That basically means that you don't have a front end. You can't add tags. You can't do a document get element by ID. There's no window object. You don't have any of those things. And then the last thing is a node is modular. So one thing about me, I am really, really, really big into examples because I'm, me lecturing, that's no better. You could watch a YouTube video, right? Especially since I'm doing this remote, that doesn't help you at all. So I'm really big into interactive examples. So let's just dive in and kind of show some of these basics about Node. And this is actually perfect. So there's something called REPL. It is read, evaluate, print loop. So if you run Node on your computer here, so if I just type Node, I see my little caret here. That means I am inside of REPL. And basically, I can do evaluations. I could do, console.log of whatever. I could set up variables. It is interactive JavaScript, essentially. So it makes it really easy to test one-liners of code. It's basically the equivalent of your Chrome console, but this is inside of Node. So first of all, before we get too much further, does everybody have Node installed? And Danny?
Sorry, yes, I do.
Okay, and Linda? Okay, fantastic. I love it because I actually made the mistake of not. Oh, actually, maybe I did. Did I put it on here?
I don't think you did.
Okay. Oh, that's set up in here. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone actually went back here, but okay, good. So we have a class of overachievers, so that's awesome. Okay. So this is the REPL, and sometimes if you type Node and you get stuck in here, typing something like exit or quit, those things aren't going to work. You have to hit Control C twice to bounce out of it. So far, so good.
How do you get into Node? Like I'm in my back, but it's still I don't have that arrow.
So if you type the keyword Node, that will start it. And how about everybody does this and just play around there for a second? Just create two variables and add them together. How about that? So this would be super basic, but it'd be really good for everybody just to create something. Just to kind of see how this works and just play with it, add two strings together. Just play around for just a few minutes just so you understand. And, if you do something that's not syntactically valid, it'll freak out on you just like Chrome console would. So the nice thing is when you're adding functions, you can hit enter and it'll wait for your function to actually be finished. So how am I doing? Did everybody look lost or are we good?
I guess so.
Okay. Okay.
Nobody's staring at me concerned, so.
Everybody's staring concerned. Okay. Yeah, how about we also just just play with it for a little bit. Let me know when you guys are feeling a little bit comfortable with it, and then we'll move on. So
I'm in and I'm good, just so everybody knows.
okay.
You have to go back, you just hit the up arrow.
To go back, if you want to go back to what you typed before, yeah, you can hit the up arrow, and it'll review back your previous commands, which is pretty handy, right? And then if you want to exit, it's Control C, Control C. Okay. You guys feel comfortable with that? Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to create just a couple simple Node programs and just run them and get a feel for it. So one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create all of the examples. So I didn't pre-create. I basically, inside of here, I created kind of what examples I intend to talk about. That's kind of what I'll do, and I'll just create them live and then commit them. So some of these, the shorter ones, I definitely want you to try and go along with. But some of the other ones, the ones that are slightly longer, don't worry about actually trying to code everything out because I will commit that. I would rather you guys listen and pay attention. So when I say commit that, I mean that it'll be available on the OK Coders GitHub, so you can review it later. So is that a good approach for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's get started here. So I am in my OK Coders backend, week 1. I am going to create a new folder called examples, the new folder called basic, because Sergio likes to be super organized. And now we're going to create one called hello world.js. So right now we have a brand new file called hello world.js, right? And I'm running on Linux, so my file paths and stuff might look a little bit different, but that shouldn't matter to you guys at all. So if I just go into week 1, examples, basic, I see I have hello world.js. So I can run that by typing node space and then the file name. And I hit enter and nothing happened, right? Well, nothing happened because I'm not telling my program to actually run anything. So let me see if I can do this split screen here, because this might make it much easier for... Oh, okay, that works. So let's try a few simple things. So if I go in here and I say console.log hello world, and now I run this again, I see indeed I have hello world here, right? So it's running my program. And we can test things. Notice that it returns immediately. One thing about JavaScript and Node in particular, that there's something called the event loop, that if JavaScript, if your program's waiting on something, it won't exit until everything is done. We can prove that because I can set a set timeout. Have you guys seen set timeout? Okay. So I can set timeout of 1,000 milliseconds here, and I can run this. I'm going to see hello world. I'm going to see 1 second, and then it immediately exits. And one more thing, guys, I am going to be using ES6. I'm not sure, did Preston teach you guys about ES6, like fat arrow functions and things like that?
Yeah, he did a little bit. Fat arrow functions he taught us about. We never used anything like let or constant. We just used variable fields. So like as far as that goes, we never used ES6. But yes, the fat arrow we did use.
Okay, I love it. The fat arrow, that's going to be the most important thing. So, okay. So our hello world, we're just going to leave that alone. That's a very basic example. Do you guys want to try creating your own Node program? Just making sure that you can save it somewhere, you can find it, and you can run it. And most people that I ran into, hopefully Preston has mentioned this or taught you guys about this, that being organized and saving your code somewhere that's not all on the desktop is really important. So make sure that you guys have some kind of file structure and that you can save your code somewhere and then you can, find it again. And here, guys, I just created a add.js file in the same exact place as hello world. And I want to create, actually, I'd like for you guys to do this. Create an add.js that basically creates a function that adds two numbers together and just console.logs it out.
What did you say about add.js?
I want you guys to create a new file called add.js and create a function that would just add two numbers and console.log the result.
Okay.
Let me know when you guys feel like that you're there, comfortable with it, and let me know if this is a good speed or if this is too slow or too fast. All right, how do you guys feel about that? Okay, no problem. If you guys have questions, please don't be shy. Ask questions. You can ask Seth there on site or ask me directly. No problem.
Okay, so I installed Node. Give me directly to the folder I guess where I installed it.
Okay. So you didn't install it globally.
I guess not.
Okay.
Because now I'm going to go way back quite a bit.
Okay. So,
So I put it in the sample folder.
okay.
So
The easy way to fix this is so I would do on the next line is you install. Npm install. Now you should be able to access the video.
okay.
Here's one here. No, can't use it much different places.
Okay. So that should be directly there. Okay, cool.
I use it in the package program. Yep, what do you think?
Well, first of all,
Sorry. You have Windows. It hurts me.
does it? It's not.
Okay, yeah.
And Danny, how are you doing?
So what? Do I run it
I
in?
think I got the function down. I don't have any numbers in it, but I think I got as far as the function goes. Pretty sure I got it.
Okay. We'll give the girl a few more minutes. Actually, excuse me, I'm going to just get some coffee really quick then, guys. Everybody's working on this.
I mean, you're calling add
Calling
function,
that,
then
oh.
you need to pass an argument to it. Well, I would probably pass the numbers if you're wanting to add. A and B just stand for. You need a comma, sorry. And then also, so your function is called add. You don't need function.
Okay, sorry guys. Okay, how did everybody do?
We're almost there, sir. You're not quite yet.
Sounds like we might need a review of JavaScript.
TIR. That's how you say it. Okay. Can you just go to week 1? You did. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun module.
Okay, so everybody good now?
Yes, we're good over here.
Okay, Danny, you're good?
I think so. Just a quick, just so I'm verifying here. Like all I did was the function. So I got function add A and B, and then I got my parentheses and below it return A plus B. Like I'm just writing a function. I'm not assigning variables, am I?
No, Nate, well here, let me present kind of what I was looking for, and then let's talk about it, make sure everybody's on the same page. So here, I'm in add.js. Essentially, I was looking for a function called add, and you can have, you know, A and B, N1, N2, what X and Y, whatever variables you want, and for you to go ahead, and you can do this a couple different ways. We can just console.log, the answer being A plus B, right? We could do something like this, and we could run that, right? And I could do node, add.js, the answer is 9, right? Or we could do this more sophisticated and return A plus B. But if I do this, look what happens. If I don't have a console.log, nothing happens, right? So what I need to do is capture my output from this. So I can do var answer equals this, console.log. So either way, this method is more preferred because there's something in programming and computing called pure functions. This here is a pure function. Basically, it doesn't have any side effects. It doesn't do anything outside of itself. So it doesn't modify or call any global variables or other functions. So first, is this scary to anybody, what we're doing here?
It's not scary, no.
No.
Okay, Danny?
Hey, real quick, instead of backticker, that's actually a colon where you're like in your parentheses and your log answers.
Oh, in between them, that should be just a comma there, or which one?
It's not a backticker. It's not a backticker before answer. That's just a normal colon, yes?
Yes, that's a colon. These are just regular single quotes.
And now, just out of curiosity, the percentage in J, I know that's the percentage. I know what that does. The J, that could be anything, can it?
Yeah, J is just a JSON object. Sorry, that is a bad habit. This will give you the exact same answer. Notice I remove it. Well, it put an extra space in there, but it'll do the exact same thing. That is just a bad habit of mine, so I'll try not to do that because that might be scary to people.
Well, why do you do it?
Because whenever if we have, for example, if we're doing a console.log of something larger, like if I have console.log of answer, and my answer is an object, right? If I have something like that, which is a little bit more complex,
Right.
and I run this, here it works out well. Sometimes, depending on how deep it is, it gets formatted differently. So if I do a %J, the formatting, notice it's slightly different because it turns into a JSON object. So that's just personal preference.
I got you.
So don't let that scare you at all.
No. It's not bad. Just curious.
Ask Seth. They used to call them, whenever I taught OK Coders, because Seth used to be a former student, they called them blahs. So, because Sergio would throw them in there, and Sergio never explained what they were, so they just said, oh, console.log, blah this, blah that. So, okay, so far so good with our ad example, right? Do you guys want to spend a few minutes just going over kind of basic JavaScript, a couple of functions, just a little bit of a review before we go on, because we're going to go on and it's going to move really fast. So I want to make sure you guys are comfortable with the basics before we jump in. What do you guys think?
I'm fine with it if everybody else is.
I think it'd be good to refresh it. I
Okay.
can't remember how to function. Wow, we even admit that.
I think it would, because I think there might be a little bit, maybe different ways that you might do things, or one thing's done that might be confusing a little bit to us.
Okay, let's do it. So, okay, and this, my split screen here, is this a okay format for you guys? Everybody can see this?
Right now, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, hey, let's share my screen. Okay, let's try that again.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, so here, I'm going to close these and let's go ahead. I'm going to create a new one. We're in basics. Here. I'll try to make these same for anyone looking at these files later on GitHub. Review1.js doesn't really help them, so this will be review-functions. So, okay, essentially, a function is just a way to have placeholders, right, and just call code concisely from multiple places. And functions, they can be named or not. So if we go back to, so let's do this. Here's a function called say hello, right? So right now, if I run this, my review functions JS, I have no output. Why don't I have any output?
We're not running this, calling
We're not calling.
Yeah, we're not calling. We defined the function. We could define functions till the cows come home, but unless we run that function, unless we call it, nothing's going to happen, right? So, okay, so let's try this again. I run this. Yay, I have my answer here. What if I wanted this to be able to say hello, in someone's name? Hello, John. So what am I going to get here now if I run this?
You'll get hello John together.
We still get hello, right? Because we're passing John into the hello function, but notice that our function definition, it doesn't have any arguments to capture that name or do anything with it, right? I want to make sure you guys understand that.
Yeah, so I understand it. So if it's blank, it's not going to pick it up when you put something in the parentheses. But if it's
Yeah,
name up to like the word name,
yeah. If I have now an argument named name and I say hello and I do comma name in here and I run this, now I have hello John, right?
okay.
So far so good?
So you have to have the name of both.
Yes, because this captures the input of whatever that first argument is, goes here. So let's try this. If I have hello John, oops, if I can type, say hello John, comma Wick, right? So we have two arguments now. The first argument is John. The second argument is Wick. So if I run this, what am I going to get?
Hello John.
Yeah, right? Hello John. But if I change my arguments around where I have this as first and then I have last, so now I run this, I have hello John Wick, right? No surprises. So what happens if I change this back to just hello John? What's going to happen with my last argument?
It's just not going to be there. You didn't assign it, so it won't be able to be blank.
Well, that's a bummer. Hello John, undefined. See, and this is where the blobs come in handy, because if I do, for example, %J is just a JSON object of this. So look what happens if I do this. I still have hello John, but now I have it as a string, and I still have undefined. But if I use %S for string, let's make sure this doesn't make me into a liar. I run this. Okay, cool. It's gonna make me into a liar. Disregard this completely. Then we won't use that. The way that you would, there's a couple different ways that we could fix this, right? We can always make sure to pass in 2 arguments. We can say hello John and then a blank string, or we can do something here that says that, hey, if bang last, if last doesn't exist. So this is, did Preston go over truthy and falsy evaluations with you guys? Okay, so if bang last equals a blank string, if we do something like that, then notice that it's going to work correctly, right? So there's 100 different ways to skin a cat here. So let's. Well, are you guys good going further here? We'll just keep going. We'll just do more examples like this.
I'm good.
Okay. So here, that was our say hello example. Let's do a couple composite functions now. So here, we're going to do our add, right? We're going to return a plus b. But now I'm also going to do another one called multiply. Return a times b. So let's do something like this now. So if I do 5 and 4 here, and I just do a console.log of answer. Right now, this is going to be really obvious, right, that our answer is going to be 9, right? But I can make these things much more complex. I can say add mult of 5 times 5, and this here can be add mult 5 comma 5. So notice that we have 3 different functions here that are running. So if JavaScript is always evaluated left to right, inner to outer. So the most inner functions get called first. So first, this thing, if we run this, mult5, this multiplication will run first, then this will run, and then the add will run. So if we think about this, this is going to be what, 25? This is going to be 10, so our answer should be 35 here, right? So if we run this, we see indeed 35. And we can always test the order that these things are running in, because I can go ahead and just do a console.log in here and just say mult a comma b. I could say do the same thing here. Now, if we run this, we see indeed that our mult 5 times 5 gets run first. Then our add 5 and 5 gets run, and then basically the composite, our 25 from here and our 10 from here, get added together, and that's our final answer. So these are called composite functions. Whenever you have functions that rely on the answer of another function. So nothing complex here. This is just, or nothing hard or scary. This is just, I guess, a level up in complexity, right? So far, so good. You guys with me here?
Yes.
Let's see. Do you guys want to try some of these examples yourselves? Or are you guys good with this? You just want to keep going until we run into something that is kind of scary?
I'll let the ladies in class think that. I'll probably do one.
Yeah, Cheryl, Linda? What do you guys think?
I don't know. I just like watching you. I can learn a lot. But I can do it.
Okay. Well, I will keep going. I will do some more examples here. So let's go ahead and I'm going to basically just comment out anything that has output. So whenever we run this program, oops. I'm just going to comment all those out. Okay. So let's also talk about one more important thing is functions. We can define them with the function keyword, or they can be as variables. So I can say var. You can basically have things point. So here, if I say var func equals add, let's talk about this. This is going to be interesting. And here I call func with 4 and 5. what am I going to see over here when I run this? 9? Yeah. But if I say func equals molt, we shouldn't be surprised, right? That whenever the function gets called, it points to the exact same place as our molt function. So we see 20. So what happens if I change this to be, say hello now instead?
4 plus 5.
Could it be undefined or something like that? So it's not a string?
Well, notice that we have our hello 4 and 5 here because that's what this says. But then we get this undefined. Where is this undefined from?
The last.
It's from where?
Maybe it's the last variable that it's special.
Well, there's no variable. So notice that this undefined, that undefined basically is from, so here, let me go ahead and break these things up real quick. If I do var answer, and I have too many var answers, let's comment that one out. Equals this here. So right now, my program is exactly the same, right? But if I comment out this console.log of answer, it gets rid of my undefined. So we know that our answer variable has undefined, but why is it undefined?
Trying to multiply a string.
Well, we're not even doing any multiplication. So notice that before, when we were doing add or mult any one of these, we always had something that's not undefined, right? And notice that the difference between this function here and these two functions is these two functions have the return keyword. This one here does not.
Is it because the answer is a placeholder and you don't have anything in the placeholder? So that's why-
Yeah, the answer is the placeholder for whatever func returns, right? And notice that when func was pointed to add, it returned a plus b, so that's what answer became equal to, right? When it was pointed to mult, it returned a times b. But when we run say hello, say hello doesn't return anything. So if I run this again, I'm going to see the exact same thing undefined. But if I actually say here return null or true or whatever, that's what's going to happen here. So, and I can, instead of console.logging, I could say return hello plus first plus last. I could do that, and notice that now my output's exactly the same, and I don't need this console.log in here, right? Do you guys see what we just did there? Seth, are people lost? Do you look scared?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, Danny, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay, so we've kind of covered a lot here. One more thing, that whenever there's something in JavaScript called hoisting that shouldn't affect you guys, but it might lead to strange bugs if you're not aware of. If I, for example, try to call, let's move here to the very, very top, and I say my answer equals add 4 and 5 and console.log answer. Is this going to work up here?
No. Well, yeah, we'll get that.
Well, good question, right? Let's run this. So we see indeed it does work. So if I change my answer to mult, I'm going to see it works exactly the same. If I change my answer to say hello, also exact same thing. But if I change it back to be func, so my answer equals the function here, notice that we get a scary error that func is not a function. The reason is whenever you have the function keyword, JavaScript, whenever it runs through the entire file first, scans it. Anytime it sees a function keyword, it immediately hoists it to the very top right before your very first line. So that's why it's called hoisting. But variables and stuff don't get hoisted. So watch, if I change this, instead of doing var func equals say hello, if I change this to just be a function func return what do I have? Say hello. I'll need to pass in my arguments and everything. But if I just do something like this that uses the, and if I can spell. So notice that even though this up here didn't change at all, just it being defined as a variable or it being defined as an actual function, that's the difference. So far, so good?
And what did you call that?
It's called hoisting. 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 That, I mean, you guys shouldn't run into that into your code really, but sometimes if you have a long program and you start moving things around, and if you have a function that's defined with a var, then you would have that. I mean, basically, we could change any of these functions. I can change this to say var add equals function. That's the exact same thing. It's just not hoisted, right? So there's benefits to doing things like this or using the function keyword. So I promise we'll have plenty of time to get into discussions about that. So, okay, do you guys have any questions on functions before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay, Danny, you're good too?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Here, I'm gonna just uncomment some of these things, and then this is how it'll get saved. Just run this, make sure it's not broken. Okay, so whoever reviews this, they'll have to basically listen to or watch this video to figure out what we actually did here. Okay, next thing that I want to review, let's review arrays. Do you guys feel comfortable with arrays?
Yes, I think so.
Think so. We're about to find out, right?
Yeah, that's what I am, but that's arrays and functions, and I know it's probably the two big things to do. Arrays and functions are my sweet spot. And I think I'm getting better with functions, but the arrays, we haven't spent a whole lot of time on that.
Well,
we haven't spent time on it. I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. Let me rephrase that. I'm sorry.
well, we will go. This is good that we're doing. That we're doing this review. So, okay. So brand new script, review dash arrays. So our very basic array, right? Anytime you define an array with the square brackets, then I can go ahead and just do a console.log of numbers. I run this, no one's surprised, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Arrays also have methods and properties, so I can do nums.length, for example, and I can get the total length of the array, right? It has 4. I can do nums. This is called a array accessor. That whenever you do the square brackets of an array, you're getting the element at that index. But this is 0 index. So this very first number here is at the 0th position. This is at the 1st position, 2nd position, 3rd position. So for non-programmers, that doesn't make sense. It'll take you a little bit to get used to that. So if I want to get this number 4 to print out, this here would be nums at 3. Right? And let's actually change this around so we're not using numbers, so this is less confusing. So okay, sure. If I wanted to print out tree here, how would I do that? What index would that be? Oh, I love it. Okay, you guys are on top of this. Okay, tree, yep. So yeah, you guys get it. So arrays also have, let me actually make some comments here. Arrays also have methods, functions on them. So I could do nums dot, and we see that we have we have a whole bunch of them. We have map, we have push, pop, reduce, join. We have a whole bunch of these, right? I'm not sure how many of these you guys have seen. Well, I think when I subbed for Preston, I think I showed you guys quite a few of these actually. So I know you guys have seen them at least once. But if I push on something else here, let's do bird. If I push bird, and I notice that my variable name nums doesn't make sense, but that's okay. We'll ignore that. I see I pushed bird on here, and notice that it is indeed on my array. So, and the opposite of pushing is popping. So I can say if I want to get something off of it, so var last item is going to be nums.pop. I can console.log last item. And I run this and I see that, hey, my last item is bird, right? And if I keep running this, this is the poor man's loop right here. If I keep running this, I'm going to see that the last item was bird, then person, then tree, then dog, then cat, then undefined. Pop will return undefined when there's nothing left on the array to pop off. So, and think of push and pop, guys, as a stack. Think of it as a stack of dishes. The last one that you push onto the stack, the last one you put on top of the stack, is the first one that you pop off of the stack. Just like a stack of plates. Does that make sense? Okay. So far, so good? Okay. So, let's do a couple more things here. I'm going to just comment all that out for whoever. And let's do a couple interesting things. Some of these other array pieces. Let's do... arrays also have something called join that is really useful. Where are you, join? Adds all the elements of array separated by a specified separator string. And this looks kind of scary the way that this looks, but essentially it takes an array and returns a string joined by whatever you put in here. So if I add a comma in here, and I here console.log this, I'm going to see that my elements are joined with a comma, right? Here I can do 1, 2, whatever it is. So I can join with whatever. I can also join with whack n is a new line character, so these will be separated on new lines. I can join with nothing at all, and it'll just be run together. You could join with spaces. So there's a really easy way to take an array of items and turn them into a string, right? So that's what join does. And now let's see the opposite of that is split. So if I have a string here, I'll just do this with some, let me pick better numbers than that. I can say string.split. So notice split a string into substrings using a specified separator and return them as an array. So I can say split this on the space character, and again, let's go ahead and console.log this. So I run this, and now notice that I have an array of individual string pieces, right? So far, so good. Is this like jogging anyone's memory? Danny, what do you think?
Sorry, yeah, I'm great.
Okay. So the other fun things about, so we've talked about the basics. We have just a few more things to talk about on arrays. Here, these are going to be the fun ones. So here, if we have, for example, an array of numbers, we can map this array into another array, and that's what the map method does of an array. So if I just do so this doesn't, oops, let's do this, answer equals nums dot map, and notice the info for map calls a defined callback function on each element of an array and returns an array that contains the results. That's probably not very helpful. If you look at this call signature, it looks pretty scary, right? So let's go ahead and just define this. So we're going to use ES6ers. Basically, map takes a function, so we have to give this a function, and I'm going to just use fat arrows here. If I say end to end, so end fat arrow end, and I console.log this, I'm going to see nothing's changed, right? It is the exact same thing. But if I say here n times 10, each of my numbers, they're going to be mapped to something 10 times greater, right? Pretty cool. So it is a really easy way to do a one-to-one mapping. And this here might not seem useful, but for example, if we wanted to take an array of actual test scores and turn them into actual percentages, I could go ahead and do the opposite, right? I can have numbers of tens and divide them down. I can also take all these numbers, I could shift them, right? I can say n minus 10 and change where these numbers start from. So map, pretty much, if you have 5 elements that go into map, you're going to have exactly 5 elements that are going to come out of it. So far, so good?
Yeah.
So here, let's just do this times 10. No big deal. Okay. So where map comes in handy is when you join it with split and join. Basically, whenever you start merging some of these things together, that's when it becomes really useful and powerful. Same thing if we have just a bunch of numbers, and if I want to find all the even numbers in here, how would I do that? What do you guys think? How would I get all the even numbers out of this array?
Nums divide percent 10.
Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said before the percent. Filter, yep. Nums.filter, and we can say filter. Basically, filter only returns whatever filter returns. If it returns something truthy, it gets included. So if I say filter n to fat arrow to true, return true regardless of what n is, I'm going to see all my numbers show up. If I return false, I'm going to see that none of my numbers show up, right? So if I do something like n, let's try that again, n modulus 2, so that thing there is called a modulus. That's what that's called.
Yeah. Modulus.
So here I have all my odd numbers, and obviously I just want to say where n modulus 2 is equal to 0, and I'm going to get all my even numbers. Right, and I can also use this a lot of different ways. I can say, hey, give me all the numbers that are greater than or equal to 5, right? Or all of them that are less than 5. So filter is really powerful in that sense. We can also, at the same time of using a filter, we also can use, there's something called sum and every. So if we do nums.sum, this here basically runs a callback function, and it will return true if any one of our numbers passes. If I say if some number has to be greater than 20, this thing here is going to return true, right? Because there's at least one number greater than 20. There is the other side of every. Running every means every single one has to be greater than 20. We notice that only one number is greater than 20, so that's going to be false. But if I say that, hey, all numbers have to be greater than 0, that's going to be true. So that's just a really easy way to check to make sure at least one element of your array meets some condition, or all elements of your array meet some condition. Some and every, I'm showing you guys that. You're probably not going to use that very often until you're much more comfortable with it. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. So let's actually put all these things together for a little bit here. So let's say that we have a list of numbers just as a string here, and that's how can I filter out all the odd numbers from there? Let's start, and actually I'm going to start picking on people here. Cheryl, I'm going to start with you.
Well, we would use a filter for one.
So I'll do string.filter.
That arrow.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to get even.
Well, odd is just going to be the opposite of even, right? How do I get even then? Show me how to get even.
Greater than, let's see, n modulus 2 equal 1, equal 1.
Yep, that's going to be all my odd numbers here. So if I... But we're gonna have a problem here, Cheryl. Yeah, because this is way too easy, right? What I'm asking you. Notice that str.filter is not a function. Well, remember, .filter only works on arrays. What is my string variable? It's a string, right? So I need to take this puppy and convert it into a string first. Or I'm sorry, to convert it into an array first. How do I do that? I'm sorry, guys. It's really hard to hear you over there, too, so you might have to speak up just a little bit.
Convert a string back to an array.
Yep, so how do I do that?
Is it a join?
What?
You get it to an array?
A join is going to take an array and convert it back into a string, so we want to do the opposite.
That's opposite. Okay. What's the opposite? Is it a split?
Yeah, let's try. So what is my command going to be? String dot split
Dot split.
of what?
You would put in the string variable there.
I would put in the string variable here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's try that. So I'm going to run this. Oh, that's weird. Remember, Cheryl, that we're using the string dot something. Whatever the dot is on, that's what it's actually running on. So this split is running on string already. So you're just trying to split it on the same exact thing. So here, if we leave, let's just see what happens if we leave. Yeah, if I leave split blank, I have just one huge string, but it's an array now, right? So we're getting closer. So if I put inside of split, so what can I put in here to split it on to get those numbers individual?
Just put like a comma.
Yeah, let's try a comma here. So I throw in a comma, and awesome. I have an array. Yeah, I have an array of numbers, but notice that these numbers, they're still strings, right? So how can I convert this into an array of actual numbers? Do you guys see the little back or the single quotes around them? That means it's a string and they're not actual numbers. It's a string that contains a number, but what else can we use in here? Linda, oops, let's pick on you now. So Cheryl got us halfway here. So how can we take this and convert this array of strings into an array of numbers?
Parse in.
I'm sorry?
Parse in.
Parse int? We could use parse int. Okay. How would that look like?
So then we can do, or we can just add the plus sign, right?
Yeah, plus sign works.
Yeah, but where do I do that?
Okay, so if we add that to,
Well, let's take a step back, guys. We have a string. We have an array of strings. We want to convert to the exact same length of array of numbers. Out of everything we looked at, what tool would we use, right? We've seen .length, we've seen .pop, we've seen .join, .split, .map, .filter, .every. Which one of these would we use?
map.
Yeah. So here,
Yeah.
I'm going to say nums equals nums.map. So what goes in here now? What am I mapping?
So in that arrow, in plus,
N plus
or would it be plus n?
plus n. Yep. So let's try this. So if you run this, notice we got rid of our pesky single quotes, right? So now we indeed have an array of numbers. And now, Danny, to finish us off, how do we take this array of numbers and filter it for just the evens? Let's remove that there. So
It was a great question. I'm taking care of my kiddo, so I missed like this whole thing, but I find I'll rewatch it. So I saw you do earlier you had oh man, you had the fat arrow, then you had the I'm not gonna like you. I seen it earlier when you were doing, but I don't remember what it was. It was the I know Cheryl was saying it.
yeah, modulus. Yeah. So we want to do nums equals nums.filter, right? Because we're trying to take an array and filter things out of it. So I'm going to do nums.filter. And here we're going to say we're n fat arrow, n modulus 2 was going to give us all the odd numbers in there, right?
Okay.
So if I run this, indeed, here are all my odd numbers. And guys, we could do modulus, for example, if I do modulus 5 equals 0, this would give me all my numbers that are a power of 5, okay, or multiple of 5, 5, 15, 50. If I do modulus 10, it's going to give me all my numbers that are a multiple of 10, right? If I do modulus 3, just so you guys know how modulus works, 15 is the only one of these numbers that's a modulus, or I'm sorry, that multiple of 3. So that's kind of how that works, and that's, you know, that's really cool if you're trying to find prime numbers or anything like that. So it's hard to think of real world applications of modulus besides something mathy, but anyways. So here, guys, this is good. We took one problem, taking this, a string of numbers, and going through the individual steps of splitting that string into an array, taking that array and mapping it to actual numbers, and then taking that array again and filtering it out to just have all the even numbers. Right? And I want to show you that we could do this all on one line here. We took 5 lines to do this. I could do this all on one line. We could say console.log, our string here, dot split, dot map, right, dot filter, and if I run this, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So this here looks a lot more scary and a lot harder to follow than this, right? But you guys, I promise, stick with coding, and this here in about a year or so, this will feel natural. Having a constant string here, that's weird. But if you had this as string.split, you would be able to be like, okay, I see what's going on here. No big deal. But we'll stick to this here. But I want to just make sure that you guys understand that these two things here are equivalent. Well, these two things right here. Do you guys have any questions about arrays?
No, I don't.
Okay, Cheryl, Linda?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Well, my answer, I just jumped way ahead.
Well, if you guys are good, hey, do you guys want to take a quick 5-minute break or anything, or do you guys want to jump into objects?
I just need to grab a cup of coffee.
Okay, we'll just take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll jump right back on. How about at 10:25?
Sounds great.
Okay. You guys ready to continue?
Yes.
Okay, let's jump into objects. Let me share my screen here. Objects are really fun and probably the hardest concept for students to grasp.
And let me tell you, that was a learning experience.
I need to learn how to. I don't drink coffee at all, so I was like,
It's not hard. I'll
No
show you
idea.
how to do it.
I assume it's like maybe.
Well, you have to go in there and you have to grind things. And then after you grind things, you just put it in the filter. There's a filter already there,
Okay.
and it catches the ground
grounds.
beans. Then you just put that in there, and you just like.
You guys ready for objects, or do we need to wait a few minutes?
No, we're good.
Okay. So here's kind of a crazy looking object. No big deal, right? Like, object can contain other objects in it. It can contain arrays, numbers, any of the basic JavaScript types it can contain. So that shouldn't be scary to you. So let's take here. I'm going to create a Sergi object here. So that's fine here. Okay, if I console.log Sergi out, no one should be surprised, right, that we get this output. So what if I want to just pronounce Sergi's age? How can I get that?
Sergi.age.
Yeah, Sergi.age, right? That will do it. What if I want to get my second child and print that? How do I do that?
Well, I know how to do it.
Sergi.kid, and then you would put the brackets and number 1.
I love it. Yep. Okay, so you guys are totally familiar with this. Okay, very good. So we can also not only, so this is called the dot accessor. When you could use that, we could also say Sergi square brackets age and get the same thing. Or Sergi square brackets kids. So JavaScript lets you do things in multiple ways, which is really cool. This is handy sometimes. You guys normally won't see this with objects, but that's okay. So let's take our Sergi object. What if I had another kid? How would I add that to my kids array? So for example, if I couldn't touch anything up here, I had to add it as a new line of code. How would I do that?
You go, I don't know how to start it. Dot put, Sergi dot kids dot put, and then but I don't know if that's how you start that whole line code.
Yep, nope, this is good. So Sergi, that's what Sergi contained. .kids is our array of strings, and .push. So if I run this now, I see, yep, Sergi now has an illegitimate child named Frank. Awesome. So what if I wanted to add Sergi's gender to here, and I couldn't modify this up here? How would I do that?
It wouldn't be push. It wouldn't be Sergi dot push, would it?
Nope, because we don't want the gender in an array. So how can I add that? Just like we have name and age here as a property, how can I add that to my Sergi object?
I think you can do Sergi dot gender, and then you would put in.
Yeah, whatever I want, right? The cool thing about objects is that you can add to them, you could take away from them, so you could do all sorts of things. So objects are extremely versatile. And so when you guys, definitely get familiar and comfortable with objects, because they're going to be, objects are first-class citizens in JavaScript, and everything centers around them. So it's really good to just get familiar with them. So one more thing. So this is a cool example here, right? Let's talk about one more thing about objects that is really important. I'm not sure if Preston covered this. There is pass by value and pass by reference. Have you guys heard those terms?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys familiar with that?
I don't recall it now.
Okay, let's go over that. If I have a function called add1 to whatever, and I say, I'll just do n++, right? And if I say var count equals 5, I call add1 of count, and I console.log out count. What is my count going to be? You guys should all expect this to be a trick question, but what is count going to be? It is still 5. So the reason is any elementary JavaScript type, primitive JavaScript type, like a string or a number, when you pass it to a function, when you pass it anywhere, the value is passed. So here, n, just the value of 5 is passed here. So this is just saying that 5 plus plus, that gives me 6. But if I say n equals n plus 1, that should do it, right? That should give me 6. But if I run this, I still see 5, because the value of n, that's the only thing that's passed, is the value and not the actual variable n. So this is something that drives beginning developers nuts, because this isn't just JavaScript. This is any programming language has this concept of pass by reference or pass by value. But if I change this and I say my count is going to be n of 5 in here, and I say n.n equals n.n plus 1. If I do this, then I'm going to see n equals 6, and I can always just do my count.n. Whenever you pass an object to a function, that entire object, it doesn't get copied, the whole thing gets passed. So this here is just something to be aware of. I don't expect you guys to fully grasp this now. Just be aware if you ever pass a string into a function. So if I undid this how we had before, and I pass, for example, this here is a string, and I say, hey, this string equals this plus cat. I'm going to get the exact same string because these strings and numbers, they are JavaScript primitives. So primitives are your numbers, your strings, and your booleans. True, false, those are all primitives. If you pass that into a function, it gets copied into that function and it doesn't get pointed to. Have I lost you guys yet?
I'm a little confused on this.
This is something that I just want you guys to be aware of. I don't want you to actually worry about it because if you write your code well, you won't run into this. But this is definitely well, Seth, how often have you run into this in like real world code?
Not that often. I mean, because I wouldn't write it this way. It seems very odd to me that you do it this way.
Yeah, if you ever, so this function here, it has side effects because it's changing your input argument, right? The way that we would do this, if you want to never have to worry about this, is, so here, our count is 5. Add 1, what we would do, just say return n plus 1, and then just here, just say count equals add 1. If I do that, sorry guys here, then it'll be 6, and I won't have to ever worry about trying to worry about pass by reference or pass by value. So this is the way to circumvent that, where you don't even have to think about it. Okay. So sorry, we totally got off the off of objects. So let's get back onto objects here. So one more thing about really just the pass by value, pass by reference. That is important for objects because that's unique to them. Let's go ahead and okay. Okay, so I have an object called stats, right? So what I want to do is in here write a function that I can call generate stats for my stats that will basically go ahead and add in the sum and add in average for all my numbers in here. What do you guys think? Or you know what, that makes this even easier. Instead of having side effects, because this here we'd be modifying this object, we can have this that generates stats, takes in an array, and it will return an object with the sum and the average. So this thing here returns our sum, our average, and our original numbers. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So how do you guys think that we would do that? What is our generate stats function going to look like? Cheryl, we'll start with you since no one wants to volunteer.
Oh, I'm just trying to get my head around this. Okay, so we're going to try to write a function that adds the sum of that array.
Yeah, it's going to. We're going to write a function that will return an object that has the sum of the numbers passed and has the average of the numbers passed, and then our original numbers that we actually passed into it. So it's going to return an object with 3 things in it. So what is that going to look like?
Well, let's just start trying to sum. Right.
Yeah. Well, first let's write our function, right? Let's go ahead and write our generate stats function, right? So if I do something like that, So even if we just do this right here, this, at least our code will kind of run now. So if I run this, well, I see undefined, cool, because our generate stats isn't returning anything, but I can easily, the easiest one to handle here is returning nums, right? So I can say, well, let's go ahead, let's do this. Let's say var stats equals an empty object, stats.nums equals nums, and then here we're just going to return nums. So if I run this at the very least, oh, I'm sorry, not return nums, return stats. Oops. I run this and I see, hey, at least I have an object that has my array of numbers inside of it, right? So we're at least, we got one of our 3 done. And we can rewrite this easier. I can say stats equals nums of nums like this. Same exact thing, right? No big deal. So, okay, Cheryl, so how are we going to get the sum of all these numbers?
I guess I could use a map, maybe?
Well, remember map, well, that's actually, sorry, so we went over our arrays. I forgot one of the important ones called reduce. This is totally giving you the answer here, but it's okay. Let me go back to our review of arrays for a second, just so you guys can see this. Whenever you have an array of numbers, we can add this up 2 different ways, right? We can go ahead and create some kind of total variable that holds it, and then I can say nums.for each number total plus e equals the number, console.log total. I could do that, right? That'll give me the total of it, and I can actually run this node review arrays. Cool, 136. That sounds good. That sounds like the answer. I could do this as a one-liner instead of having an actual temporary placeholder variable. I could say, instead of doing this here, let me just comment this out so you guys can see this. I could say var total equals nums.reduce. Reduce, okay, let's read the definition because this is probably going to be comical. A function that accepts up to 4 arguments. The reduce method calls the callback function 1 time for each element in the array. Calls a specified callback function for all the elements in the array. The return value of the callback function is the accumulated result and is provided as an argument to the next call of the callback function. That, guys, that doesn't mean anything to me. So looking at the documentation, that's really the way to go. But let me just show you. This is something that you might just have to remember. Is basically, it's going to take the first number in the array of A, and it's going to add the second one to it. And then that sum there will be 15, right? And then it moves down. So now it's going to be 15 is the first number. 55 is the second number. It's going to add those together. That's going to be A. It's going to take those 3 and add 66 to it. And that's what reduce does. So we actually run this. Yeah. So it is a one-line method to get the sum of something. Right? But let's not... we don't have to do it this way. This is just... I'm sorry? No, there isn't. JavaScript does not have a sum function. So how do we get our sum again? So Cheryl's still on you. So we don't have to do the reduce because I went through that very quickly. We could just do a simple loop. So whatever you feel comfortable with. A map? Okay. Well, here, let's go through it together. If we wanted to add these numbers together, we would need a place to hold the total, right? If we just do a simple loop. So here, if I say sum is 0 inside of stats, I can say nums dot for each number, and I can say stats dot sum plus equals that actual number, right? So if I do something like that and I run this, I see that here's our numbers and here's our sum. Right? Pretty cool. And if we want to be really fancy, we could totally just say sum is going to be nums dot reduce a comma b of a plus b, comma 0. This here is the exact same thing. This is probably much harder to read and understand than this. The comma 0, that you only need that if you have a potential of having an array. So if I run this with an empty array, look what happens. This thing here is going to freak out because it's trying to reduce an empty array with no initial value. That comma 0 is the initial value for it. So giving it that, it'll be able to tell me that the sum is 0. So, but starting sum off at 0 and then doing a for each, that is the equivalent, right? So here, let's undo. Okay. So, okay, Cheryl, you got yours complete. So, Linda, let's jump to you. How do we get the average of all these numbers now? Hey, that sounds good to me. Okay, so what do we do with this? We have this awesome expression here, but it's not being saved or assigned anywhere. We have this awesome expression, so if I run this, well, let's see what happens. So we got the average is nan. Nan means not a number. So that's not good, right? So let's go back to what you had here instead. Instead of adding it up here, what if we assign it down here where you actually did this? What would that look like?
I'm not sure.
So remember that any object, we can assign more properties anytime we want. So I can say stats.avg equals this. Right, and if I run this, I'm going to see, oh, nailed it. My average is still nan, so let's look at this and see. Our nums dot. Hold on, let's see where our nan is coming from, because that's really weird. I'm sorry, guys. So, well, I'm not sure if this was Linda that misspoke. So we're doing nums.sum. We need to do stats.sum. That's why. Stats.sum divided by nums.length.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 13. That sounds pretty good. But so let's take what you were saying and just move this up here like we had, and just see what happens. So average is going to be the sum divided by the length, right? We run this, so first of all, it's going to complain that it can't read property sum of undefined, because here we're defining this function, but we're trying to use, defining this object, but we're trying to use the object inside of here, so we can't actually do that here. So we need stats to be defined first before we do that. So basically the only way that we're going to make this work is to just define afterwards like this. And this is great. This is perfect, actually. This would be the way to do it. So, and the cool thing is that now we have this generate stats function. We can run this for multiple numbers, right? So I can go ahead in here and say generate stats for 10, 20, 50, 100. And notice that I can get those various stats for different numbers, just like that. Do you guys have questions about this? I know that we're moving a little bit faster, but I just want to make sure that we stay on track, because we haven't even started talking about Express or Node or anything yet.
No, it all makes sense.
Okay, Danny, you're good with this?
Yeah, sounds good, man. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's just jump into Express then, because this is going to be where all the new material is, right? So, well, let's talk about Node modules for a second. Here, under basics. So I'm going to make a file called modules.main. And we can have, and let's do another one called modules.child here. Excuse me, modules-child here, .js. So we can have code in various files and pull them together. So if we went back to our, where was our arrays here that we did was it in arrays? Functions, where we had our functions to add and multiply. I can have these things inside of my main here, and if I pretend I had like a bunch of different math functions, right? If I have here, let's add another one called sum of nums, and I want to return sum dot reduce a comma b, a plus b is 0, and pretend I just had a whole bunch of these here. We'll go ahead and do another one for. I'm sorry?
Nums dot reduce, right? Mine's in. You put some, I think you mean nums.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Seth, you're awesome. Okay. Average of nums here is going to be return sum of nums divided by nums.length. So we have all these helper functions that we wrote, and then we want to have our actual, the meat of our program down here. These here can really get into the way, and basically Node is really cool that we can move these things somewhere else. So I can move these things into a file called here modules-child, for example. I'm going to move them here, and I can say var helpers equals require. This is going to be the weird part. Period whack module dash or modules dash child. So period whack means we're going to look in the current directory, and this is what tells Node that this is a local module. So then I should be able to do, let's try a console.log of, I can do helpers.add of 5, 5. So let's see what happens here. So if I run this, I'm going to see immediately helpers.add is not a function. So whenever you define a module, everything in it doesn't automatically get added. You have to actually tell it what's going to be exported. So I need to say module.exports equals whatever I want to export. So I can export add, I can export average, I can export sum, I can, what else do I have in here? Mult. I can export all these things. And then if I run this, I'm going to see that those things actually work. So that they're exported. So it is a really easy and clean way to keep your code very organized and in separate files. So as your project grows, I promise you don't want to keep everything all in one file. So we'll use modules more and more. So I just wanted you guys to see how this works. Do you guys have any questions about this? Because I know it might seem a little bit like magic because I'm just throwing things in here, but...
When you run that, since you put the export in it, will it find it?
Sorry, could you speak up just a little bit?
When you run it, since you put the export in there, will it find it?
If you don't have the exports, then it's not going to find it. Was that your question?
Yes, is the answer.
Okay. Yeah, if we don't have this here, then it's not going to export. So, for example, if I try to export here, I'm exporting add. If I don't export add and I try running this, it's not going to work, right? Or if I can do average. Average takes an array, but that'll work. So it just depends on what you're exporting. And we can also export, like, they don't have to be functions. I can go ahead and export something. Helpers.favenum. I can export actual, values. So that's a good way. If you need to save passwords and stuff you don't have in your main file, you can have that usually in a config.js file or secrets.js file, and we'll talk more about that. But require is always joined with module.export, so you'll see that. We'll create lots of our own files, but the big thing about require is that there is an entire Node ecosystem of different modules called packages that we can use. So if we actually just go to npm.js, I believe it's .com, okay. There are hundreds, so let's look for terminal colors. If we want to color our terminal, so there are 379 packages. Here's one called Chalk that we can go ahead and look, it makes these really cool things. Here's how we would install it. Here's how we use it. And let's just run this really quick, see what happens. So I'm inside my examples. I do npm install Chalk. It will go ahead, it'll download it, it'll install it. Ignore these warnings and stuff. I'm not sure why we get those sometimes, but just ignore it. So anyways, let's take their example here. I'm going to just comment out my stuff. Let's pull their stuff in. And notice here that there's not a period whack in front of here. That means it's going to look for a package called Chalk and not a local module. So if I run this, I see hello world is in blue, right? I'm sure I could do red. I could do all sorts of things. So there are, I don't know how many packages there are total. There's probably north of 100,000. I can't imagine. Well, there's 36,000 packages that just depend on Chalk. So Node has a really strong ecosystem. Translation, I'm not sure what project would be interesting to you. There are so many. So here's 3,000 packages of language translation or code translation, things like that. So the package module is really powerful because that means that you're not always writing code from scratch. You can use other people's packages or libraries. Do you guys have questions about that before we continue? Okay. And Danny, are you still dealing with the little ones running around?
Here and there, yes. If you're going to do this replay, it'd be great. I'm going to have to watch it again, but yes.
Okay, we can take a quick break if you want, if you just need like 5 minutes or so.
No, I'm good. Keep going. I'm listening. You're on speaker, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one package that we're going to learn, so if we go back to our overview here, we're not even halfway, but that's okay. we're going to look at ExpressJS. ExpressJS is an extremely powerful Node package. So Node, first of all, has packages or modules inside of it. If we look at the API, here's all the different modules that Node has inside of it. So there's HTTP that we could use, and we can create a web server. But looking over this documentation, it's pretty dense. It's kind of hard to follow, and unless you're an expert on sockets and things like that, this here is going to be pretty hard for you to follow and understand what's going on here, right? I'm familiar with HTTP, and this here is difficult for me to follow. So this is not a good thing to use. But we see that console, this is something that Node automatically includes, so we can see that all the various options that console has. So pretty cool, but there's dozens of different modules that Node gives us, right, that we can use. So, but one module that it doesn't give us that someone else wrote is called ExpressJS. That is just a wrapper for the HTTP module, and it makes life super easy. So here I'm going to actually just talk for a second about what it does and kind of how because here we're going to talk about the concept of routes. And I want to make sure that we're on, and everybody understands what we're talking about. Whenever we have a URL, you have, first of all, the protocol. Here it's going to be HTTPS, right? That is the protocol. Then you have the host name. Our host name is github.com. Everything after the host name, including that first whack, is the actual route. So this whole thing is the route. Git.com is the host name. HTTPS is the protocol. So if we had something after here, if we had a question mark, sort equals true, that there is a URL parameter that we can pass in here. That on GitHub that doesn't do anything, but that is a URL parameter. So there's a bunch of different pieces to it here, and also we have different ports. If you ever see a website that has a colon after it, if I go to github.com colon 443, that's the same as HTTPS. That's going to be totally fine. If I try to go to HTTPS GitHub on port 80, it's going to freak out saying that I have a SSL error. So you can run different. Notice I went to port 80, it automatically sent me back to HTTPS. Port 80 is tied to HTTP, which is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTPS is just that, HTTP secured. So everything on the web now runs on HTTPS. Are you guys familiar with some of these pieces I'm talking about? Okay, well, this is good, so I'm glad that we're talking about this. Whenever we're about to start doing... Well, here, let's dive in first, and then we'll continue talking about ports. We just basically just talked about the different components of our URL here. So let's make our very first Express web server. So here, this is basically all you need to create a web server. And when I say a web server, do you guys understand what I mean by that? Not exactly. Well, let's run this, and then we will dissect it and talk about it here. So I'm going to go ahead and here go to examples. We're going to create a new folder called Express, and I think I said in my overview I'm going to call it Hello World, so I will call it Hello World.js. So here, first thing we're going to do is include Express. So I'm going to use require Express. So first thing, if I just try running this as is, let's see what happens. Let me flip these things around a little bit. So if I do node of hello world, I'm going to get this error saying cannot find module Express. The reason is I need to install it because it does not come with Node. It is an external module. So if you're ever with Express, it's super easy to install. It's going to be npm install Express. But if you're ever unsure, you can always just Google whatever module you're talking about, npm space Express. Go to this page here, and you're going to see the installation, like, oh, npm install Express. And NPM stands for Node Package Manager. So here, so if I run this, it is installed, and then I actually run my hello world. Nothing happens because I'm not really telling my code to do anything. Well, Express uses something called, for some reason, applications, apps. So it doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to say, to me, it doesn't make sense why they called it that, but that's okay. So we create an application, and then I'm going to say app.listen on some port number, right? So I'm going to say listen on port 3000. And I run this, and now notice that my code doesn't return automatically. It just sits here, right? Doesn't really tell me what's going on, so I'm going to Control C out. And I'm just going to add a console.log in here. So whenever we talk about ports and Express or in general, these things always, whenever you bind to a port, you're always binding on something called localhost, and that is your loopback adapter. So that is an IP address that your computer has, and I'm going to deep dive into this here in a second because this is something that is pretty important to understand. But if I just go to localhost :3000, that is going to hit my Express server. Okay, if I hit it and actually run it, listen on port 3000, well, I don't have that error. I have a different error right now. It says cannot get whack. Okay, that's because I have a server running here. I don't have it actually doing anything. So if I say app.get on my route there, and then I'm going to have a request and a response, and I'm going to say my response.send and I refresh this, oops, kill my server, restart it, I see hello. So this here, guys, this is a full-blown web server. If I had my laptop that I'm working on pointed on the internet, you guys could go to an IP address, my IP address :3000, and you would see hello, and I could actually have people hit this off of the internet. So that is a really, really awesome concept, how easy that is, because 10 years ago, you would have to write 20 years ago, you would have to write a web server in C or C++ or something low level, and it was this huge ordeal. And I remember, I wrote my first web server, and I was ecstatic. It took me hours to do, and it was just a monumental achievement, because now you're part of the internet. You can serve things, other people can find you, and it's this huge, exciting thing. Well, with Node, you can literally do it in 5 lines of code. We could trim that down to probably 3 lines of code, but it makes it super easy. So let's talk about this here. This local host, that is a host name, and every computer, if I type ping localhost, I'm going to see that it's...
Hey, Sergi, you're not presenting it.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Thank you, Seth. If I go to a terminal and I type just ping localhost, I'm going to see that I'm getting so many bytes back, and localhost is this 127.0.0.1. That is your loopback adapter. That is your localhost IP address. There's a lot of jokes, like there's no place like 127.0.0.1, so is a Wizard of Oz joke that if you see it on a t-shirt or coffee mug, that's what they're talking about. Anyways, any URL or domain, so github.com, I can go ahead and I can ping github.com, and I see that their IP address is 192.3.253.113. I should be able to go straight to that IP address, and it's going to complain. Okay. So GitHub, obviously, you're not supposed to go to it without the actual domain name, but you can normally. Okay, GitHub's a bad example, but every domain name out there has an equivalent IP address. So I can ping google.com. It has, so here this is IPv6 IP address. So I'm not going to worry about those for now. We'll just concentrate on the IPv4 ones that have 4 pieces to it. So those are IP addresses. There's a lot more about it that I can go into, talk about. I could spend a full 4-hour block talking about just IP routing, networking, things like that, but I'm not going to bore you guys. The important thing to know that each port on your computer can only be used by one thing. So if I have a program running on port 3000 on my computer, I can't have anything else running on that same port. So let me go ahead here, and if I run my node hello world, and if I go ahead and what happened to it? I open up another terminal here and I try running the exact same thing here, same place, I'm gonna get an error saying this EADR in use, that's just saying error address in use 3000. So I can only have one thing running on a port at a time. The other thing is any port under 1024. So if I try listening on port 80, I'm going to get an error because those are privileged ports. So it's going to say that, hey, access denied for this. If you run, if I run this with sudo, or basically if you run this with administrative rights, it will work for you. But generally, we're going to use ports 3000, 8000, ports above 1024. So a port number is a 16-bit number, so the highest port number is 65,535. You guys don't have to remember that. Just, if you take 2 to the power of 16 minus 1, it's going to be 65,535. That's just the highest port number you can have. So anyways, back to our example, and if I stop killing my server. Okay. So this here is a full-blown web server. We see hello here, and we can send back. So here I'm just sending a string, right? I can also send in here full HTML. So I can change this. Oops, and let me not do this as sudo. So now I see that this indeed is hello world, right? All these lovely alerts. Okay. And I can kind of see where this is coming from, powered by Express. Some of these details in here, we're going to be using the Chrome console, the network tab, quite a bit later on. There's nothing really to show you here, but this is what the server is sending back, and this is what it gets rendered as, right? So notice that right now, here is our, remember that we talked about the different parts of our URL. We have the protocol, we have the host, and then we have the actual route. Well, here we don't have a protocol. That's because it's implicitly HTTP. So Google Chrome just hides that from you because it just doesn't think you want to see that. Localhost is our host, and this is our port, and then our route is actually just a WAC, is an implicit /. And that's why over here, this here is called a route handler. And we're listening to the WAC route, and this is what we're going to return. And we can have as many route handlers as we want. So I can say, hello from 1. And let me kill my server, rerun this. This is going to get old very quickly, and I'll show you guys a tool to fix that. So here I still see hello world, but if I go to WAC 1, I see hello from 1, and I can create as many of these routes as I want. I can go ahead and copy this and do WAC 2. So here's my 1 route, 2, and this is a legitimate web server that has different points that you can go to. Very, very cool. So the other thing that we can do is, let's make sure I'm staying on track here. Yeah, we're going to talk about the request and the response objects. Basically, this whole scary looking thing here, this is called a request handler. So rec is our request and res is our response. So, and let's look into that. So we can have multiple things. Let's go ahead and copy this for a second. We can have dynamic arguments. So if I want to say hello, first, okay, this could get really old for me. Control Cing and rerunning this. There is a program that you guys can install on your computer if you do a npm install -G for global nodemon. This will, if you guys don't mind, go ahead and install this now because it'll save you a lot of heartache and tears later. So if I run nodemon for my hello world here, basically anytime my program changes, so if I change something, it will automatically restart it for me. Which is pretty cool, right? So I don't have to refresh or anything like that. So okay, you guys following along? Sorry, Danny, I missed. You broke up there for a second.
You were saying install the NodeJS.
Yes. So if you run npm install -G for global nodemon, that will install globally on your computer, and you can run that from any location.
Okay, will you leave that up just for a second? I'll put that in here now.
Yeah. And how about
whatever program on,
It kind of keeps track of the structure.
yeah, so anytime you save it, it restarts the server for you. So instead of him having to go back, close the server, start back up again, it just does that. Very nice.
Okay, mine's installing, so thank you for that.
So guys, really quick before we move on further, since we're going to be using Express so much, could all of you guys create a very simple Express server just like this? And these const, Danny, you mentioned that you weren't familiar. You guys haven't really used them. You can completely replace them with vars. They're interchangeable at this point, and we'll deep dive. We'll talk more about that. But for now, anytime I have a const, that just means that you're never going to reassign that variable. So it's going to stay. You're never going to say app equals. You're not going to reassign it anywhere down the line. So.
I'm fine with the const. I've been doing some other training online as well, and I've been using to let the const to ES6, so I'm fine with it.
Okay. And don't forget, guys, before to make this work, you're gonna get an error that's gonna say that the Express package isn't available. You're gonna have to run from the directory that you have this script in, npm install express.
And that user in the
Yeah. And guys, excuse me for 1 second. I'm just gonna get some water. Who has a running web server?
Can you put it back up, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, yep.
But type that in. What do I do once I get all that typed in there?
You get save it and then execute it, run it with node hello-world.js, so or whatever you called it.
I mean, you can run it up higher and still work with it. I can hit DIR.
So they've got a error.
Oh, what kind of error?
It says row error. There's with the arrow underneath the key.
And then start it and then hit
The
tab.
captain module spec. Oh, you told me earlier we got to do that.
Oh, yep, for the npm install express.
Yeah. So
You're trying to CD and trigger it. So you should, yeah, you should install Express.
I'm installing Express. We'll see what happens with that.
If you install Express. Yeah. Cool. If you install Express. Oh, did you, what do you have to do up here? Alright, so did you install Express? Yes and no, because it's saying it's not. So can you close out of your terminal? No, sorry, control. Okay. Yeah, you have to have Express in the same area you use. Now rather than sync.
We want to allow access, yes, whenever we download the.
Yes, yep.
That's what I thought. I think I might be getting this web page. And
Oh, sorry.
okay, it says listing on port 3000.
Yep. So, Danny, once you have that, pull up just a web browser and go to localhost :3000.
Okay.
Oh, well, Windows are. Alright. And now, here we go. Now we're ready. Sorry. See, that's
Localhost what? Something searching?
yeah. So now you can go to
I'm sorry, Danny, I didn't catch that.
Localhost.
Sorry, localhost :3000. So whatever port you're listening on. So yeah, 3000 right now. That should bring it up.
Awesome, I got it. That's awesome. I was a web developer.
Yeah, you guys are legit web developers now. You guys made a web server. You guys are in the club now.
yeah, now you can go to it. So you should be able to refresh it.
So basically, it's installed slowly, but every time that we build something, we have to pull Express into what we're doing. I'm a little confused on that piece.
Yes, so, okay, since you installed it in the directory, any file in this directory is used Express now.
Okay.
But if you went to another directory, it would not be there. So you, people like certain you like to not have express everywhere. I have more like convenience.
So everybody got a web server running?
Yes.
All right. So that is, I'm going to stop at hello world, not modify this one anymore. So we're going to preserve it. I'm basically just going to take it. And let's see what my next example is supposed to be for this. You know what? Here, we're going to create just a new one called params. Ooh. Let's try that again. So here, I just took the exact same thing and copied it to params. You guys can, I'm not sure you guys want to follow along or just watch me do this and then however you guys are more comfortable with it. So here with params, for example, if we wanted to be able to say, go to whack hello and say hello here. No params. Oops. So if I go to whack hello, I'm going to see hello, right? But what if I want to go to whack hello, whack Sergi? It's going to say, hey, can I get this route? Okay, no problem. I can add a route handler for that, right? I can go ahead and copy this. I can add a whack Sergi. I can throw Sergi in here. Awesome. I can refresh. Awesome, it works. Well, now if I want to say hello, Kevin. Well, that's going to get really old, right? Creating manual routes for every single potential input I have. So there is something that Express does called URL parameters. And if you put a colon before a variable name, it will assign this as a URL parameter. So now I can access this value using request.params.name. So now I can say hello plus rec.params.name plus the rest of this here. I'm going to have to break this up a little bit. But now if I refresh this, I'm going to see hello Kevin. I can do hello Bob. I can just do hello. Pretty cool, right? Yeah, each time, yeah, all of these basically are various, they're different routes, right? So I could do, numbers in here that would just be strings still, but so Express is extremely powerful in that regard. So we could do various things where we can have multiple parameters, right? I could do this as hello first, whack, colon, last, and I could do this first, last. And notice if I try doing something like this, it's going to tell me that I can't find this route because this here is expecting 2 parameters and I don't have 2 parameters. So I need to do hello, whack, Sergi, whack, G, and I'm not printing out the second part, but it is required. So these things here aren't optional. So if you define a route that has 2 parameters required, it's 2 parameters are going to be required for it. Do you guys want to try this yourselves really quick? Doing something just as simple as hello, colon, name. Just making sure that you guys are on the same page and everybody understands this. Are you guys good at that? We'll just take like baby steps here because this is so... I feel like this is probably going to be really new material for you guys. So I want to make sure that it doesn't... that we take baby steps and make sure that you're comfortable with every step of the way. Let me know when everybody has that, and we'll move on.
Yeah. So when it crashes, you have what? If you restart, just close it and arrow up. Arrow up. Nope, still crashing. Cool. Yeah. There we go. Yes. There we go. Nice. Cool. So you're at what did you do? You did hello whack thing. So no, this is all fine. And here, whack hello, whack hello. There you go.
All right, Danny, you good with yours?
Yeah, I'm halfway there, Sergey. I'm just going to watch, honestly, right now, and I'm going to do the replay, and then I'm going to go through and follow the replay through and type. And I've got a lot of things saved, but I feel like at this moment I'm just going to watch it because it'll help me better.
Are you sure? Well, hey, Dan, how about just share your screen and we can just go over your code really quick because I'm sure it's something simple that you're missing. You want to just do that real quick? It'll take just a minute or two.
Well, you can share it. I just got to create the parameter there. Does that make sense? I just don't want to hold anybody up over it.
Yeah, it's okay. No, we'll wait. No problem.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
That's why I don't do this stuff at home.
No, I have kids. I understand. Believe me.
And what I would do if I were you guys is probably just like have the basic forms like copied somewhere.
Yeah.
So you can just copy and paste it because it's listening to everything. The first 3 lines, like I would just keep those because it's not going to change.
Required. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So yeah, same everywhere.
I'll do that. Save you time. Would I have to put this thing?
Yeah, you can plug it in.
I'm not sure which one's the key for.
Almost there.
No problem.
Yeah, there we go.
So now if you run it,
Okay.
so mine's called params.js, so that's what I'm using here.
Yep.
Then you should be able to go to localhost :3000 whack hello whack, Sergi or whatever name, and that's what you should see there.
Hey, quick question. I'm still listing a port 3000 as far as my terminal goes. Like, should I stop that?
If you're using NodeMon, well, are you using Node or NodeMon? Because if you're using NodeMon, it'll restart automatically.
Okay, I'm using NodeMon. Okay, it's still saying I'm listening, so I should go to my. Oh. I'm not sure what I'm using, to be honest with you. No, I'm using Node. It says Node Hello World.js.
So in that case, hit Control C and just hit up arrow to rerun it, or use NodeMon. NodeMon will be much easier because you don't have to remember to restart it. Makes testing your code much easier.
Yeah, it's not letting me. Stop the listening part.
Did you hit Control C?
Yes, sir.
Here, let me stop presenting. Danny, could you present your screen then so we can just see what's going on?
How do I do that?
In the corner at the very bottom, you should see a Present Now button inside of our Google Meet tab.
Okay. And my entire screen?
Sure. Yeah, just do that. That'll be easier. Okay, there we go. So, well, if you click down into your console down there, hit Control C down there once you have focus on it. Yeah, click down there and then hit Control C.
Yeah, I'm doing so, but it ain't doing anything, man.
Well, that is interesting.
I mean, I would say it's froze, but like you can see, I can.
Yeah. Could you kill this tab and recreate it?
Yeah, I can. Here, let me copy and paste this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry. I'd kill just the terminal part. So down there in the bottom, just close that terminal.
So I killed that. You know what I mean? But if I bring it up, it's still.
Oh, well, here in the very, click, that's close panel. Wow. So, it's funny, Danny, I use VS Code too, but I never used a built-in terminal, so
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, hit the trash button. Try that.
What's that?
The trash can button, or the trash can icon over there. Kill terminal. Okay, now bring it up. Okay, now start it with NodeMon instead. Do you have NodeMon installed?
Yeah, I believe so. I did earlier. So just NodeMon.
Yep, and then the file name or whatever the path is.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, it's gonna crash because you're in
Okay, coders.
yeah, you're in OK Coders. Looks like your code is in OK Coders, whack JavaScript, whack NodeJS. So I guess hit the trash can icon again and yeah, restart it. You might have to just CD into it. So yeah, open it back up. And now,
I got you going to the file I was in.
yep, there we go.
I got you. Sorry. I see that. Begin node. So should I go into params?
Just into Node.js because your params is actually your file that you're running. So yep, just into Node.js there. All right, now you should be able to do NodeMon of params.js. Yay. Okay, so now go to Chrome. And go to your port 80, wherever that is.
So port.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go to localhost colon 3000. I'm sorry. There we go. So now you should be able to do whack hello, whack Danny, and that should work. Yay. Okay. Awesome. Danny, you knocked it out of the park.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, so. Okay, so far, guys, we've covered. I have a bunch more examples to do. I want to give you guys the opportunity to play around with Express a little bit. How about this? Do you guys feel comfortable trying? Maybe we'll take 15 minutes to try a little assignment of basically create a new file called add.js and be able to take in 2 arguments on the URL, 2 numbers, and add them together. So here, if I present my entire window here, basically I should be able to go to whack add whack 34 and 7, and it should tell me 41 is the answer. What do you guys think? You guys think you can do that?
Say it again one more time.
Create a route handler called whack add that takes in 2 parameters, number 1, number 2, and add them together. So I should be able to go to, let me present my screen here. I should be able to go localhost colon 3000, whack add, whack number 1, whack number 2, and I should see 41 or whatever numbers I use here.
Okay.
Linda, Cheryl, what do you guys think about that?
Go for it. Yep. Thanks.
Give that a whirl. How about we just take 15 minutes just to try that really quick? Because I want to make sure these things here are solidified for you. And really quick, guys, one more thing that might help here, let me present my entire screen again, is in the OK Coders documentation, there is, on the links on the bottom, basic routing. If you look at this talks about, okay, basic routing doesn't. Hold on, let's look at this. Routing in here talks about these route parameters, kind of what we're talking about. Well, this will probably be reading for later for you guys, but this here, like, if you didn't catch what we're doing from the beginning, or it's a little bit confusing, don't worry, this is all documented, so you can actually, read it and catch up. So how about we try that just till noon, just about 15 minutes. Are you guys good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Try it.
Yeah.
That's the best way to learn, right, is to try. Yeah, no, I'm here. Yeah, so res.send, it originally was meant to send a HTTP status code. So if you give it a number, that's what it defaults to. But if you give it a string, that's what it actually sends back. So pretty confusing. That's kind of an edge case and gotcha, unfortunately. So sorry, I I forgot about that till you guys ran into that.
Okay.
But you guys are way better at problem solving now because of it, right? So yeah. Okay, so well, how do you guys feel about that? How all that went?
There was a little struggle.
Yeah.
It's slow to struggle because we're growing.
On a positive note, we actually tried to simplify it where normally we try to do things the really hard way, and we tried to do it the easy way this time. So.
Well, here, how about Seth has probably done this with you, but let me just go ahead, just for sake of everybody that will watch this later, just go ahead and go through the example so everybody can see what this looks like and just kind of what to expect. So here, I'm going to create a new one called add.js, and const express equals require express. Const app equals express. Whoop. Alright, we're gonna have a app.get whack add. I'm gonna do num1 whack num2, and then my request and response. So, and notice here I'm gonna do app.listen down here. The app.listen doesn't matter if you put it before your app.gets or after, so it's pretty flexible. And just a comment for anyone seeing this. Okay, so first we want to get our two numbers, right? So num1, this is going to be my request.params.num1. And my num2 is going to be request.params.num2. And I'm sure, as you guys discovered, these things here are strings, so we have to cast them to numbers, right? Right? You guys discovered that or ran into that? Okay. So, and if we do something, so let's see what happens for everybody watching. If I do a res.send of num1 plus num2, let's see what that looks like. Okay, res.status, use send status, and the reason it's good just keep running is basically because it's not, the request hasn't ended yet. So if I even just do something here saying that answer plus this, that will work. Is this kind of similar to what you guys had?
That's how we did it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so that's pretty much, there's probably a couple different ways of doing it, but that's probably the most obvious and easiest way to do it. So let's talk about, so basically guys, everything in Express is going to look like this, where you're going to have a route handler, you're going to have the actual route, you're going to have your request, your response. Very, very similar to that. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple other things here. I'll just call this here. We'll just call this JSON. Okay. one more thing that we can do is we can use a request.json that basically lets you send back any JavaScript object. And let me go ahead and run JSON here. Okay, so 44, that's not really impressive because that's just the number 44. But if we have in here an actual I guess I should make this more believable. That's fine. If I refresh, I get a really nifty object here, and I'll show you there's actually a Chrome plugin that does all that, but that's really useful because if you have in here, for example, just some crazy complicated object that gets shown up, this plugin, this is what it looks like normally. This is what my Express server sending back, but there's this plugin that turns it into this neat little useful thing. JSON formatter. Okay, that is what it's called. Let me just Slack this to you guys, or anyone that wants this. It makes life much, much, much easier. Okay. So one more thing that we could do with JSON, we kind of saw that we could do various URL parameters. But those URL parameters always have to be in a specific order, right? So if we have, for example, let's go over here. If I wanted to keep a list of people, actually, sorry, let's take a step back. Let's make something that right now, everything that we've done doesn't keep any state, right? It always just processes its whatever route and then returns it. So let's make something that keeps, that's something called stateful, that basically keeps its state. So we're gonna make a new file called counter.js. And I'm just gonna copy this in here. And I'm gonna keep a variable now of count, and I'm gonna say count. So reading this code or seeing this, you guys can imagine what this is going to do, right? If I go here, every single time I refresh this, my count is going to go up. So I can go, multiple tabs or whatever. Each time someone visits it, it's just going to increase the count. And notice that if my server goes down and back up, my count resets, right? So this is something called stateful, because our route handler is referring to something outside of itself. So it has actual state. So pretty easy, pretty cool to make just a simple counter like this. But we can also go ahead and do this where we can go ahead and create, for example, a shopping list like this, where instead of a simple variable, we can go ahead and create something that we're adding an item to it and then having another route to get items out of it. Are you guys following me so far, or is this... Well, let's try that. So let's go ahead. We're gonna make two different lists. We're gonna do this two different ways. So the first way we're gonna do is we're gonna have a list with params.js, and I'll copy any one of these. Okay. So here, what we want to do is create a variable called items. And if you just go to whack, we're just going to go ahead and output this this list of items. So I'm just going to do this as JSON of all of our items. But we also need to have a way to add items to here. So I'm going to basically make, if you go ahead and do a whack item name, it'll go ahead and, let me actually call this name here. I'm going to say items.push request.params.name, and then I'm just going to do the res.json of items here. Oops, I'm sorry, and I don't have this completed here. Request, response. Okay. So we import Express, we create our Express app, we listen on port 3000, we give a nice little message, we define a place where we're going to store our items, just a temporary variable. We have a route to get all of our items out, and then we have another route to push items in. So if we run this, and I go to port 3000, I see an empty array. But if I go to whack milk, cool, I see milk in here. If I go to whack eggs, I see eggs in here. If I see whack sleep, I'm going to see sleep in here. And then if I just go to whack, I just get the same exact thing out. And the cool thing is that anyone, you know, if I had a public IP address, anyone can use this, and you could view this from your phone or anything. So here, if I add one more thing, I want some Coke, I can refresh over here, and we see it show up. So it is stateful. Pretty cool, right? We made a really simple shopping list. What do you guys think about it? You guys are awfully quiet, so it makes me nervous.
No, it's
Just what?
yeah.
Taking it in.
So what do you guys think about that? Does this seem like black magic sorcery, or is this like, okay, I get it, I see what's going on here?
No, it makes sense. I get it. Yeah.
Makes sense? Okay. So let me ask you this. How can we take our simple example here and add more variables to it? What if I wanted not just the name of what I'm getting, I also want to know the quantity of how much I'm getting? Can I push two things onto it? I mean, I could do, you know, Coke whack 3, right? That I want 3 Cokes. Right? I could do something like that. I could come up with some kind of URL name that I could do whack quantity here. And then instead of pushing just the name on here, I would be pushing an object onto my array. Oops, let me clean up my code here. So this here is going to be my name now, and I'm going to have the quantity is going to be cast as a number, rec.params.quantity. So now if I run this code, if I push Coke whack 3, I see I have 3 Cokes. I can go ahead and do eggs whack 12. Cool. So I have a shopping list. It's getting a little bit harder to use now, right? Because we have all these URL parameters, and we have to remember the order of them, right? So it's getting a little bit unwieldy. So let's make this really unwieldy. That, hey, I want to know the price of these things, what price I'm willing to pay for each one. So I'm going to add another argument in here called price now. So now I'm going to do price of rec my params.price. So now we have, first of all, no items, but now let's go ahead and add eggs. I want 1 dozen eggs, and I'm willing to pay $1.99 for them. So, okay, that works. This here, though, you know, as you guys can see, it's going to get pretty unwieldy quickly, right? Because it would be great if some of these things, if I didn't know the price. Right now, I have to enter a price or I get nothing, right? Those arguments, they're not optional, as you guys have seen, right? So entering information using URL params, that can be unwieldy sometimes. So let's see how we can use something called query parameters instead to make this much easier. So let's actually review really quickly what a query parameter is. So a query parameter is anything after a question mark, and it always takes a name value pair. So I could do name equals eggs and quantity equals 12. That would be a query parameter that I could use. So notice it doesn't change anything, but we can make our program take something like this. So let's go ahead and take our list params here, and I'm going to basically save this as list-query just so you guys can see the difference here. So here we're going to go ahead and use the same thing. I'm going to make this whack item now. And just while we're testing this, I'm going to just output out rec.query, request.query, just so you guys can see what this looks like. So this is my list query. Let's go ahead and run this. And if I go over here, I have, so let's just clear that out. So I have nothing here, but if I go to whack item now, I see an empty object here because I don't have any query parameters. But if I go ahead and say name equals eggs, I have eggs in here. And if I say and quantity equals 1, cool, I have quantity. I can go ahead and do price equals whatever. You know, the order, the nice thing about this is that order doesn't matter. So store equals Walgreens. I can put these things in any order I want. So that's the cool thing. And some things, you know, if I don't know the quantity or the store, I can leave those things out, right? So all of these with query parameters, all those things are optional. So now, I mean, I could make this really simple. I could go ahead and say that, hey, the name is going to be rec.query.name. The quantity is going to be .price. I could do something like this. I could go ahead and say that the, what did I say, the store is going to be rec.query.store. I could totally do something like this, and here I'm going to respond back with items. So if I refresh this now, I'm going to see that my shopping list now is a name, a quantity, a price, and a store. But if I go ahead and try to add, for example, name equals milk, I see here's my milk, but my quantity is null and my price is null. That's not quite what I want. We can change this around. Sorry, go ahead, guys. So could you repeat your question?
Why didn't store show up?
Why didn't store show up? Oh, store didn't show up because store here is... Sorry, let me share my screen again. That is an excellent question. Why store didn't show up? Store didn't show up because this thing here is undefined and it's not going to show this, but because we're trying to cast these to a number, that's why they show up as null. So if I remove these, the plus signs in front of this, if I'm okay with them just being strings, only milk is going to show up. But the problem is if I go back to my previous example of eggs and quantity, now refresh this, notice that now my quantity and my price and everything, they're actually strings, right? Not numbers. So that's not really great. So we could you know, do this a couple different ways. We could do the lazy thing and just go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be able to predict what they're going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and push all of rec.query. So that way here, if I do store, if I do this, if I go ahead and say the color of these eggs is going to be white, I can add in whatever I want, which is really cool. And then quantity and price, what we can do here is say right here, if I can say if rec.query.quantity, if it exists, I'm going to say rec.query.quantity equals plus rec.query.quantity. So I'm basically going to check, make sure that it was passed, and then I'm going to cast it to a number. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for price or any other fields basically that I have that are a number. So if I do this, I now see that my quantity and my price, those things show up. And now this is actually useful because I can go ahead now here and say that, hey, I need slippers. I have no idea the quantity, the color, the price, or anything. I just know I need them, right? Pretty cool. And then I can go back, of course, to my regular shopping list and see all this. Well, this here, this to me, like as a regular JSON string, like if I built this as a shopping, a quick little shopping app for myself to use personally, seeing this when I go to a store, this isn't really user friendly, right? So I don't think any of you guys would agree saying that, oh, this is I love consuming shopping lists in JSON format. No one wants that. So let's go ahead and see if we can clean that up a bit. So we can use our friends .join and .map to clean these things up. So instead of doing res.json, I'm going to go ahead and do res.send of HTML. So first of all, I'm going to say here var HTML, and I'm going to go ahead and just say my shopping list here is going to be my h1 tag. And then what I basically want to do is create an unordered list that has all my items in here. So let's see what this looks like right now. If I just do this, I have shopping list, I don't see anything. But basically my goal is to say HTML plus equals something and for it to show up here. So this is kind of what I want my shopping list to look like. So I could do a for loop, but I could also, instead of doing this, remember I can do items.map, and each item in here I can go ahead and say, hey, return li plus item.name plus the li. Right, or the closing li there. So this here would convert my array of objects that have name, that have quantity, that have price, to just a string with just the name in here. And then I can go ahead and take this, because this .map is going to return an array as well, right? I can go ahead and say, hey, just join these all on whatever, on new line character. It doesn't really matter what I do it on. So that's going to turn it into a string, and now I can say HTML plus equals my items.join. And we'll actually break this up a little bit because this might be hard to follow, but we'll just see if this even works. So if I refresh this now, of course I have no items, so item, here's two slippers. So now if I just go back to my regular items, I see, cool, slippers are in here. And then I can make this more useful, right? I can go ahead and here in, basically I can add checks in here saying that if the quantity is defined, so here I can do var string just starts out as nothing. String plus equals my item.name. And then I can do little things like say that, hey, if item.quantity is defined, then I'm going to say string plus equals item.quantity plus x colon. So basically that's going to look like 3x of, actually just like that, of whatever item. So if I go in here and I go to whack item, let's do our eggs here, and let's duplicate this and just go to the root here. I'm going to see 1x eggs, right? Pretty cool. So if I go ahead and change this to 12 eggs from Walgreens, I'm going to see 12. Well, that's interesting. If I'm not going to... Seth, what was that?
We're just commenting on how delightfully you make things look.
How what?
Delightful you make things look.
Oh. Well, here, if I go to item, I see that, okay, somehow my quantity here for eggs got changed to that there, so I'm not sure how.
Add another one, see if it does it to the other one too. I don't know why. Is it because it's mapping over it? So it's
Oh, I'm doing this, I'm sorry, as a plus equals. Wow, this needs to be just a plus. I'm sorry, that's why. So before, guys, this was my bug. I had this saying item.quantity plus equals X. So first time it showed up correctly. Second time you refresh, quantity turns into a string with X attached to it. So
Yeah, we keep adding X's.
okay, so let's refresh this. So now, let's refresh that one more time. So now let's go ahead and do, let's add 1 eggs. Quantity equals 4. So now if I refresh just this here, I'm going to see 1x eggs, 4x milk, and I could go ahead and do a bunch of ifs in here. After I add the name, I could say, hey, if there's a price, I could go ahead and say the string is going to say at dollar plus item dot price. I could do something like that. So now if I add this thing in here and I look at this, I'm going to see 1x eggs at $1.99. So anyway, I think I'm beating that example to death there, but you can see that using the query parameters gives you a lot more flexibility than using just regular URL parameters. Have I lost you guys?
No, we're with you.
No? Okay. Okay, Cheryl, are you good?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I think I beat this example to death, but you can see that you could take something simple and really make it look complicated, right? So this is really dirty code, really hard to follow. I would, if I was doing this for something I wanted to keep, I would have a function here called, add item that will handle all this automatically. I would have another function in here called format item to HTML that I would give an item to, and it would do all this craziness here. So right now I'm not too worried about, and I'm sorry, I'm showing you code and it's still showing my face. Okay. Every time. Okay. Anyway, so this code here got complicated pretty quick. So the last thing, we only have about 20 minutes, so the last thing I wanted to cover was doing post requests. I think I will wait on that till just next week because that's going to be a can of worms, and it'll be really good if everybody was here. So instead, let me show you guys express.static, and it's not even on here, but I was hoping I would have time to do that. So Express, you can do routes, but you can also serve static files. So here, I'm going to create one here called examples Express. Yeah, sure, I'll just do static.js. So again, I want you guys to basically type this out enough times that it becomes rote memory, that you don't even have to think about this. So app.listen 3000, and instead of having an app.get, I'm going to do an app.use, which app.use lets you use an entire router, and we're going to use something called express.static. Let's try this. So this is the fun part about doing live examples, because I'm actually totally unprepared for this. So we'll see if this works, and then we'll talk about it. And I don't think we have to do this each time, but we'll just find out. So express.static basically lets you serve any file in the same directory. So if I create a new file here called, for example, index.html, and I do, well, that's almost useful. That's fine. So notice that the root of this automatically serves this index.html file. So if I look at this page source, I see that is my index.html file, and I didn't have to do I didn't have to do app.get whack and then my request response, and I didn't have to read the file. It handles all that automatically. And the cool thing is it can serve as many files as you want. So if I go here and I say whack add.js, it's going to show me my file add.js, which you have to be careful about because this could be a security hole, right? Because if you have passwords on your JavaScript files and you're serving that directory, that's going to be a huge vulnerability, right? So the way that you usually fix that is you create a new folder called public, and you move anything that you want to be publicly served into that public folder, so it is completely obvious of what's being served and what's not. So in this express.static, I think we can just change this, let's see, to just say public here, the path to it. So let's see if that works. So now if I can't get add.js because it's not inside of my public directory, but if I just view this, cool, that's viewable. So if I take So now I should be able to go to whack items.html and I can hit that as well. So we see that it's serving everything inside of my public directory. So this here is a really easy way to create something that you can indeed serve full websites and static files. So it's called static because essentially these files, you know, index.html, any images that you could have, any kind of media, they don't change, right? It's going to be the same file served every single time. Versus dynamic is where you have something that has a route handler and you're using a res.send or res.json, then that's a dynamic response. Does that make sense to you guys?
It does, yeah.
So basically, like with the stuff that you guys learned from the front-end courses and even what you guys learned today, you can make a full website and serve it yourself on your laptop and, you know, show your families and everything. And let's actually talk about that a little bit. And Seth, I might have you demo this there since you're on site, since we have about 10 minutes. But I've been using everything localhost. If I actually go and I see what my IP address is, you know what? Let me not do it that way. Let me just go over here. I see my IP address is this 192.168.86.21. So I can go to 192.168.86.21:3000 and I can hit that. So this here, this 192.168 address, this is my address on my wireless network. So your address where you guys are at 36 degrees north is going to be completely... Ugh, and I'm sorry. I forgot to actually share again. Ugh, okay. You guys need to call me out on that. Okay, sorry. I went to my IP address :3000, and it pulls up the exact same thing as going to localhost. So, and basically what I'm trying to demonstrate, what I want Seth to do is, unfortunately, I'm the only one here on my local network, so I can't show you, but I could go to this IP address on my phone. Actually, that's probably even easier. Let me just go ahead and do that on my phone, and just to show you that I can hit this from my phone.
What is it to look up your IP address?
On Linux or...
Linux, yeah.
Yeah, see, so on my phone, I just went to that exact same IP address, and I can go ahead and see the same thing I'm seeing, you know, that I'm serving. So we have a full web server.
Now, how do you look up your IP address?
On what operating system?
Linux.
Oh, you can use ipconfig.
I think it's ifconfig.
Yeah. Or here, Seth, what might be easier is if you just go down here by the clock and just hit networks, click on, click once on the active connection, and then just go to the details, and you'll see the IP address right there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let me. Yeah. Oh, I shared it with Sergey, sorry. You know what I even had on.
Yeah, you might not even be running anything set. Well, it's okay. I just wanted to show you guys that there, so you guys can see whenever next week, whenever we're building things, like you make your own, static application or page, you can have your neighbor check it out by just saying, "Hey neighbor, go to my IP address, blah 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 blah, colon 3000," and they'll be able to see it and play with it and check it out, and it just makes it much more fun that you can actually share what you're building with others. Do you have anything running on yours?
No, but I could. Show 'em lovely Skynet. Do that.
We were going to scare them with Skynet. We'll just have them just use one of their IP addresses and just pull that up on here instead. Just ask them for one of their IPs if they're still running a Node program.
Okay. Get the IP address.
There it is right there. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to share that in Slack, you can go get it. I can go look at it. I can run something over here. You guys hit my address. It's going to be 4200 is the port. That's my scary thing. I don't think you're going to actually be able to do anything because you don't have a login, but you can still see it. After Rickers is monster. If you want to, you can select your IP address and then the three of us can look at each other's stuff. I need to add a few coders on.
Weird. Do you guys have any other, like, we went through a lot of material today. What questions do you guys have, or do you guys just need time to actually absorb it and consume it?
Yeah, I think absorbing it and then doing things with it is really most a lot. It's actually doing, applying.
Okay, I'll post this afternoon some homework for you guys too, just to kind of like a couple things, just basically what we did in class, just maybe a few other things just to kind of challenge you a little bit, just making sure that you guys are absorbing and internalizing all of it.
Okay.
We have about 5 more minutes. Do you guys want to see anything in particular or answer any questions?
Questions I have.
We done over what we're going to be needing for our homework assignment.
I have not created the homework assignment yet, so no, I want to see how far we were going to get in class because I wasn't sure if if we're going to spend a lot more time on review. But basically what we did today in class, it'll all be express routes. So kind of what we did, I'll probably challenge you guys a little bit, and maybe what we did with that shopping list, doing something similar to that. So I'll write it up very well and do some examples in there for you. But I'll have that probably this afternoon for you guys.
Okay.
Could you also throw in some JavaScript stuff in every week's homework? I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but just it's helpful for me just to have some kind of reviews every week with that. If anything you see that we're lacking, it would be good just if you could throw in some exercises for that.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I can do that. Any other requests?
No, you did great. Thanks for your instruction.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how this was going to go remotely, but this was actually really great.
Okay, I was nervous about that too. I was hoping we weren't going to have any audio-video issues or anything, so this has worked out very well. So thank you guys. You guys have been an awesome class, and I really appreciate your time.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'll see you guys next week. Well, I'll see you guys in Slack, actually, but till then.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you so
bye
much.
guys.